we want to get through the chapter on monopoly. It's the second type of market structure that we're looking into. We've already looked at pure competition, that's chapters 10 and 11. And pure competition was, that one extreme case where we had a lot of firms competing. They're all selling a single identical item. And so it had some properties that we're going to compare to in a monopoly. Monopoly is kind of on the other side of the spectrum, right? There's only one firm and there's no competition. So we're going to compare them, see how they look like in the long run, how they compare. We're going to ask ourselves, are monopolies efficient? And also are, like what kind of power do they have? And is that power limited in any way? So to get started, why don't you in the chat, write down some things that we know about monopolies. Don't send it in just yet, but just make some notes. What do we know about monopolies so far? Give you a couple, minute or two to write these down. What do we know about monopolies? Okay, send things in if you got it. Okay, one company having control, no close substitutes, being price makers, and blocked entry, barriers to entry. Dominate the industry. It's difficult for other firms to succeed or even enter. Has a downward sloping demand curve. Yes, that's big too. They control the market. All right, all of these really are great. So let me share my screen. And it's good to remember that when we're thinking about this one firm, this monopoly, that their demand curve is the same as the market demand. Remember, when we talked about pure competition, we had the demand curve for the market, supply and demand, and then each firm, they had the horizontal, perfectly elastic demand. That's no longer the case. Now it's exactly the same. And we're going to see, and we saw already, the marginal revenue is going to be less than the price. And it's actually going to be below the demand curve. We're also going to see that the monopolist is going to set the price in the elastic portion of their demand curve. You're probably like, oh God, elasticity, chapter 6 stuff that I want to forget. Luckily, it's going to be a little bit easier in this chapter. We're not going to really calculate the elasticity, but we're going to see where on the demand curve the demand is elastic and inelastic. We can break that down. So again, when we talk about the demand, this is in the green line, downward sloping. And what that means is in order for the firm, the monopoly, to sell products, to sell this good or sell more of it, they have to lower their price. If I just look real quick, maybe at 150 here on this chart, if they sell the product for $150, they only have two quantities two that they're selling. That's not a lot. So they might want to lower this price in order to sell more, right? But they can't just charge 150 and think that they're going to sell 1 million units. If the demand's not there, they can't do, they can't get any money, right? No customers. Let me present this. Now, marginal revenue is in gray, and it falls below the demand curve. So it's underneath it. And we already saw an example on a table, but we'll do another one. Marginal revenue can be positive, and positive here, or it can be negative. So it's okay that it becomes negative, and we might see that in a table. When we're talking about an elastic or inelastic portion of the demand curve, it's always going to be, at first, there's some portion demand at the higher prices that it's elastic. And at the ends of the demand curve, it's going to be inelastic. So it's always elastic on the top, inelastic on the bottom. And how we can tell if we have an elastic or inelastic portion of the demand is looking at marginal revenue. Whenever marginal revenue is positive, demand is elastic. And then once it starts going down, around this 8.5 point, once it starts going down, that part of the demand curve is inelastic. So again, marginal revenue is positive, demand's elastic. Marginal revenue is negative, it's inelastic. And that is how you can tell the elasticity. We, in this chapter, aren't going to be calculating, the elasticity between 2 points like we did in chapter 6. We 100% can, I can say, look at quantities 2 and 4. And when you calculate that, you put that in that big formula, you would find that demand's elastic. And if you do it over here, you'd find it's inelastic. But again, we're not doing that. We can just look at marginal revenue. Now, this is in red, total revenue. The monopolist is only going to price or only going to choose to produce to maximize profit when they're in the elastic portion. So they would never choose to produce down here. It's only going to be up in this area. And one reason, well, the big reason is that that's the only place where profit maximization is going to occur. This is like mathematically, important. That's where it's going to occur. It's never going to occur down here. But also, we have this idea, if you remember, that elasticity is related to total revenue. So here, say we needed to lower our price from 150 to, I guess, 100. So we're lowering our price. That's going to cause us to sell more. We're going to sell maybe, go from 2 units to, 8 units or so, 7.5, something like that. But we're selling more. In that portion, as we lower the price, total revenue goes up. So in the elastic portion of the demand, when price goes down, total revenue increases. But then it stops. And if we were on the lower portion, now in the inelastic portion or region, when we lower the price, total revenue falls. So inelastic region, price goes up, total revenue, price goes down, total revenue falls. And that's not good because, we always might have to lower our price. We never want to price there. It's always going to be in this top portion. I'll write some of this down so I have it. Okay. So marginal revenue positive. Demand is elastic. And that's where we want to price. So whenever marginal revenue is negative, demand is inelastic. Now, this monopoly still wants to maximize profit, just like a purely competitive firm did. They're actually still going to use the golden rule, the profit maximizing rule, where we want to set marginal revenue equal to marginal cost, our golden rule. So we're going to use this for any market, whether it's purely competitive or monopolies or any others that we'll talk about. But here, price is no longer equal to marginal revenue. Remember, it was equaled in pure competition, but we do not have that now. So you just have to remember that. We're still going to use this rule to find, the price and quantity, but these two are no longer going to be equal. And maybe I'll just note, because we're going to talk about finding, the profit maximizing point. We're going to try to, see how we can do that both in a chart and also on a graph. But I'll just remind you that whenever the price is greater than average total cost, like if you're looking at a table or a graph, whenever this happens, profit is positive. And then whenever price is less than average total cost, profit is negative. And here it might be important to remember and think about, or maybe consider, do you think a monopoly could ever have negative profits? Why don't you just think about that in the back of your head? Can we have a monopoly with negative profits? Okay. So we have a chart with some information. We have demand, marginal revenue, and marginal costs. And I'm going to show you how we're going to find the profit maximizing price and quantity. The first thing to remember is the golden rule. We want marginal cost and marginal revenue to equal each other. So marginal cost in the blue and marginal revenue in the gray. They hit or equal at this point here. You look down at first and we get that the quantity here is 5. That will be the quantity that the monopolist should sell. So where marginal cost and marginal revenue are equal. Look down. So 5 in this case. But instead of pricing, say, at like $75 here, since the monopolist has pricing power, they can price a little bit higher. And we're actually going to take that point and move up to the demand curve. So take this point all the way up. And I don't know why they can't give you just a nice number, but here it's 122, so they tell you that. So it's not where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, it's a little above at 122, where this 5 units hits the demand curve. So the price is greater than marginal revenue here, and that's how it's going to be. Maybe I'll just note here too that marginal revenue is positive up until like this point, like almost 9 units. So this whole section, before that, demand is elastic. And anything after where marginal revenue is negative, demand is inelastic. So now looking at this graph, we can't actually tell if this monopolist is making money or not, making a profit or not. We just need one more curve. And that's the average total cost curve. That will tell us, depending on where it's situated, if the monopolist is making money. Now the price was this 122 up here, and it is in this case greater than average total cost here, which is given at 94. I don't know why they can't give you whole numbers or nice numbers on the graph, but it's 94. So because again, price that we're selling the good for is greater than average total cost, they're making a positive economic profit. And that area is just here between where the price and average total costs are. If this average total cost, though, was really high, this firm could be making a negative profit, possibly. So like if this is shifted upward, you can have that. Let's jump in and look at a table. So, we're going to see this, type of analysis on a graph, have to locate the point, that the monopolist is going to sell at and how much they're going to charge, and know if they're making profit or not. But we also have to do the same thing on a table. And it's a similar thing, but we may have to fill in more information. What I'll do is I'll send this to you. This is also on Canvas if you wanted to come on and see. All right, so we have a table. We have some things missing, like total revenue, and marginal cost. And our output actually starts at 3 units. So we just don't have information on like 0 to 2. That's okay. We just have like a snapshot. So we have 3 to 7. And at each different level of output, the price is decreasing. And remember, that's the idea. To sell more, we have to lower our price. So if we graph these two, this would be the demand curve. At higher quantities, we're charging less, and at lower quantities, we're charging more. So then to fill this out, we'd have to find, or to, complete like the question, how many units should this firm produce, this monopoly, and if they're making money or not. I have to find total revenue, and marginal cost. So marginal revenue is something we do have to calculate in this question. Well, luckily, some of this stuff isn't too bad, I don't think. First of all, total revenue. Well, we know total revenue is just price times quantity. So we can just multiply in each row what we have. 3 times 3, 9. 4 times 2.5, 10. And 5 times $2.05 is $10.25. 6 times 150 is 9. And 7 times 1 is 7. These are what we're just finding now. Right? So it's, it's equal to price times quantity. I want to make sure we see this out. So in each row, we find price times quantity. Now, we haven't really calculated marginal revenue yet, just because in pure competition, the marginal revenue was just a constant number. It was just the price. Again, it's no longer equal to the price. So we have to calculate it, but it's the same method of calculation as marginal utility or marginal cost. We're now looking, though, at how total revenue is changing as we sell another unit of output. So we're looking at the difference 9 and 10. 10 minus 9 is a 1. And then 10.25 minus 10.25. And then we have 9 minus 10.5. Negative, and that's okay to get a negative, 0.75. And then 7 minus 9, negative 2. When we're calculating marginal revenue, or when you're, seeing it in a table, it's always going to go down. So like we have 1.25, and then we start getting negative, but we're decreasing the whole time. Like we wouldn't have it flip-flop, like we wouldn't have like 1, negative 0.25, positive 75. It's just decreasing. So that's something you can check when you're doing an example. Maybe they don't have this number in a table on an example, and you have to fill it in. Well, at first, maybe if you get the wrong answer. You get, say, -1. Well, if the next marginal revenue is just -75 or 0.75, it can't be -1 because you're decreasing. And that would be below this. So it has to be something above it, and you just have to recheck your work. The marginal revenue is always decreasing. And remember, the negative marginal revenue tells us where demand is inelastic. So at the bottom, I'm going to say it again, and it's in this answers down here. But we have negative here, negative marginal revenue. So when we're at 6 and 7 units, we have that demand is inelastic. But over here, demand is elastic because marginal revenue is positive. So you can see that just in the table. And again, we're not calculating anything, but if we did, and we want to calculate the elasticity here, like between 6 and 7, we would get that it's inelastic, that it's less than 1 after we take absolute value. All right, but we now have another row or column to do, and that's marginal cost. Now, we've done marginal cost already a bunch of times. It's a change in total cost. But I remind you, marginal cost is going to be positive. It's never going to be a negative number. We have the change from 4 to 450, more 50 cents, and 475 minus 450, 0.25. And 575 minus 475, and then 775 minus 575 too. All right, now we have this table filled out. If you look lower, I have some questions here. So like, what is the profit maximizing price and quantity? And here we're still going to want to set marginal revenue equal to marginal cost. And if they're not exactly equal, we want them to be the closest that they can be. We talked about that with perfect competition. Now I'm hoping as you're looking at this, you can clearly identify where they're equal. Because it's exactly, they're exactly equal. You look down and we want them equal in the same row or closest in the same row. Well, the negative marginal revenues, they're out because marginal cost is positive, is always positive. And hopefully we see that here we have 0.25 and 0.25. That's exactly equal. This is going to tell us our answer for the price and quantity. We have to look over though, and it says the quantity is 5, right, in this row, and the price they're going to sell it for is $2.05. This is the profit maximizing price and quantity. And you can note the price is greater than marginal revenue here by, a lot, well, good amount. And that's how it should be. So the next question is asking about profit. And profit's going to be the same as we've discussed before. It's still going to be total revenue minus total cost. But what's nice is if we look at this table, we actually have total revenue and we have total cost. Like it's already given to us, or we found, total revenue, total cost was given. We don't really have to do much work except look at our row with 5 units, take the total revenue that we've calculated and subtract the total cost. Right, so as long as we have both of those, it's relatively straightforward. It's going to be $10.25 minus $4.75. And if we do that right, it should be $5.50. These two. And it is positive here. We have, revenue being higher than our costs. So that would be a C. So again, just total revenue minus total cost. And then C just asks what range of prices is the demand curve, elastic and inelastic, and I already mentioned. Here, we're going to look at the marginal revenue. And so the first three, prices or three quantities, 3, 4, and 5, or $3 to $2.05. We look at prices. We would say demand is elastic there because this is positive. We can use this here as positive. That's fine for like 3 units. Since we know, like, if we were able to calculate it, it's going to be higher than 1. It's not going to be like negative. But the last two, we have negative marginal revenue. So we'd say like $1 and $1.50. Those two prices are where demand is inelastic. Okay, but just to note too, in a small table, you might not always get negative marginal revenue. Like, if you're just given a snapshot, this all might be positive, and that's okay. That just, the whole part of what you're looking at is elastic. If we had maybe more information, you'd have a better picture of where it's inelastic. But don't worry if you don't get a negative in your table. It might just always be positive, just, based on what you're given. Okay. So this is a table that you can go back to and check yourself. You can see if, you can calculate the table and also find these answers, because the answers are below this, and this is on Canvas. So it's another studying tool that you have. I'm going to go down a bit further, and we do have a table here. And I have some notes on how to figure out the profit maximizing points. Having such a table is kind of what we just seen in the slides. Typically, you'd be asked, what's the profit maximizing quantity and price, and are they making a profit? Well, we have marginal revenue here. Marginal cost is here. We want to find where they're equal. So I circled that point. That tells us the quantity. So quantity is like Z here. But, if we look over, this is G, we don't want to price at G. We have pricing power. We're a monopoly. We're powerful. We can take that and go all the way up to our demand curve and look over at J. So J is our price. We're able to charge up here. So marginal revenue and cost are going to be below the price. And then once we find that, we can just compare it to average total cost to see if they're making a profit. And in this case, we have, this point, J, is greater than where the average total cost is here. So if we look over, it's like a little below H, this would be positive. We would have positive profits. Again, price is greater than average total cost. I'm going to ask you guys a question. I'm going to throw it in a poll. And you should choose A if you think yes, and B if you think no to my question. Let me put up the poll. Can't you see things at once? There we go. All right, so my question is, again, yes is A, B is no, ignore C and D. My question is, do you think a monopoly can have negative profits? About 10 more seconds. We didn't get an answer in. Can monopolies have negative profits? We have some answer C, which is an impossibility. So I hope you're not just picking the answers to or not listening. But yes, monopolies can have negative profits. It's kind of maybe a misconception. When we think about monopolies, we think about big, powerful companies that, of course they're going to be making money. But there's possibilities that they can make a negative profit. In what situations do you think that firms, monopolies could have negative profits? If you have any ideas, throw it in the chat.
I don't remember like the exact name for it, but can it be when like the own industry like just phases out on its own? I think it's called creative destruction.
Yeah, so sometimes industries aren't maybe as popular anymore because there's new technology. And what I guess I'm trying to get at is definitely we can have negative profits maybe if this demand curve falls and becomes really low. This product that they're selling, maybe there's other better alternatives all of a sudden. So demand curve for their product might fall and become lower than average total cost. So if the demand's not there, they can definitely lose money. In the chat, we have a government set price, and that can definitely make them lose money if the government decides to regulate them, which we'll talk about in a little bit. We can also have that maybe costs just skyrocket. For some reason, the cost to make their item goes up. And if that average total cost is too high, they can lose money. But they're this big monopoly. They are, the only firm in the industry. And if they were going to lose profit, it's only going to be in the short run, right? Like if they are maybe losing money for too long, they're probably going to get out of the industry. So we can have negative profits are possible in the short run, right? Maybe we can't leave the industry. So it's the same that we had talking about like pure competition. Leaving the industry happens in the long run. So in the short run, we might not be able to leave the industry, even if we're making negative profits. So we're still going to think about, the best thing that we should do. We might shut down in, just temporarily, maybe produce nothing, just not leave. Or we might produce and make a loss, depending on what's best for us. But if this continues, we can't sell our good for a higher price, or these costs are really high, and we're making negative profits, in the long run, this will cause us to exit. So altogether, what I'm trying to say is that if we have a monopoly in the long run, profits are probably going to be positive. Because if they're not making a positive profit, they're going to leave. That's a big difference from what we talked about with pure competition, who had zero economic profits. But I think it's reasonable to assume that it makes sense that monopolies, if they're going to be in the market, should make a positive profit in the long run. Now we're going to look a little bit at some of the, I'll just show you here. So like this is a picture where we find the profit maximizing point, marginal revenue equal marginal cost, and we go take that point up to the demand curve. The price is here, but the spread average total cost curve is higher than that. And so we could be making a loss, as we're saying. But when we think about maybe the difference between a monopoly and a purely competitive market, so compare the two outcomes. Maybe think about the long run. So if they're competing in the long run, think about these two markets and what happens. We know that firms in pure competition that are in the long run, we have this equality where price is equal to marginal cost and the minimum average total cost, right? And they sell where supply equals demand. So we have QC and PC. For a monopoly, their picture looks a little different. They have this downward sloping demand and marginal revenue. They're going to charge a higher price than a competitive market, and they're also going to sell less than a competitive market would, right? This is a lower quantity compared to where this point C would be a competitive market. This creates this gray triangle, and that's going to be deadweight loss. I think it's probably something we can assume happening, that when we have a monopoly, there is going to be deadweight loss in the market. And overall, we can say we do not have efficiency. If you remember in chapter 11, talking about pure competition in the long run, we had efficiency. We had allocative and productive efficiency. This equality kind of sums that up. But we no longer have that for monopoly. It's not equal to the minimum average total cost, the price isn't, and it's not equal to marginal cost either. So we don't have efficiency of any kind.